welcome back to Garden Studio. I'm Tessa Pinner, a designer and gardener in upstate South Carolina, Zone 8A. Today's video is our May cottage garden tour. I'll take you around the garden, we'll look at what's blooming, what's looking nice, any little updates I think of, and we'll end with a live flower arrangement right here to take into the house, hopefully to inspire you to do your own version of what's blooming right now. Let's go. The cutting garden is my favorite place to be at golden hour this time of year. It is getting soft light, all the colors just glow, and May is about the time that it starts to look like its best self. May through frost, it's beautiful in here. You can see we have a combination of perennials that are coming up, starting to bloom. I put in a bunch of annual seedlings. I think I touched on that in my April garden tour. Those are still pretty small, but they're coming out. And a lot of the fun things that self-seed, for example, this white rose campion, the pink rose campion, this is called Orlea. It's our version of Queen Anne's lace. It's a little shorter, but it gives that same beautiful floaty effect. I have purple clover in here. The Hydrangeas is starting to come out. Roses are big in the month of May here. It's not so hot that they start to kind of retreat. And overall, I'm at a stasis in May in here. I've done a lot of work in April, and now I just come out and really enjoy it. And I'll be watching probably for the crop of summer weeds to come in. I've done some mulching to help prevent that, but in a garden like this, it really is about the dynamism. I don't like to cover too much of the soil so that I leave space for those things to self-sow. It's a mixed bag though, because I get the things I want and I also get things I don't want. But as we go along here, I'm gonna go ahead and cut some things for my house arrangement. This is Echinacea pallida. I think this looks like a sweet little hula dancer. It's much thinner petals than the typical Echinacea. You can see an example of that right over there. They're both native prairie wildflowers and great for wildlife. Unfortunately, I can't share scent with you. Otherwise, I would give you a big old dose of this beautifully scented Confederate jasmine. It's knock you over smell right now. And this one is all the way up the corner here. It's starting to consume this piece of fence. I've got another vine across in the kitchen garden, actually two other in the kitchen garden. And this is their season. They just smell incredible. It's a little bit unusual to see this plant, Fennel, in a perennial garden, but this is something that they do in England, and they grow it for the foliage and then for the big yellow spikes of flower when it goes to seed later in the year. But this is a perennial plant. It doesn't die. It does die back, but it doesn't die in the winter. So if I wanted, I could dig up and I could actually roast, eat these fennel bulbs, but I grow them for the foliage and for the flower. I started with one bulb and you can see it has spread itself around. So eventually I'll probably divide it, move some to other locations in the garden, but it's such an interesting texture and color contrast to everything else that's happening. It's a really nice dynamic element. Why not? It'll look great in my arrangement as well. I added catmint nepeta to this bed this year, but what I did not realize when I inherited it, or either it may have acquired this here on my property, but it has a pest problem. I can tell because of the discolored sections of these leaves. So I am going to try some neem oil spraying on this to see if I can help it out. It's such a tough plant. It's not going to kill it, but it does make it look a little raggedy. You know, it's going to be fine. I think it's maybe whitefly. I don't know if you can see that when I'm shaking the foliage, they all kind of come out. So that is me noticing that I need to treat this, but no permanent harm done. I'm cutting some of this spirea, partly because it's in the path and partly because the foliage is awesome. And it will make a great base for my arrangement here. It's very feathery. And such a great color contrast. This L bed is officially switched out in the kitchen garden with tomatoes and nasturtium at the front. I have learned in the past from trying to fit too many things with tomatoes that really they like to be the king of their own space. And it looks like almost nothing is going on. It kind of kills me to have this much open ground, as it were. But in a couple of weeks, I won't feel that way at all. They will go straight up these bamboo trellises. And I do have another quick video on how to do this that I will put a link to in the notes. But in a matter of a few short weeks, they will climb as far as we give them and then probably be spilling over, because these are indeterminate tomatoes, which means they bear all season long, but they also vine. They keep going all season long. So they get real wild here by the end. The nasturtium I planted from seed, just right in the edges of the beds. It's coming out. It'll hopefully spill over here before too long. I have put some other things in these beds. There's ground cherries, the very end of last season's greens. I have cucumber and squash going at the back here. Really just a few things to take over that are tucked in the corners. So when this spinach gets out, they'll have room to kind of have some elbow room, spread their wings, so to speak. Same with the kale. There's other things over here. The peas will come out. But sometimes I do a full flip, like we're all done with everything spring and let's turn over completely to summer. I did that in this one bed in more of a soft transition here and here. This borage came up from seed and it's so glorious. I couldn't bring myself to take it out. So it's just in the last month, it's come up. The bees love it. It's delicious in a salad, beautiful on a cake. They just taste like citrusy and beautiful flower flavor. I've got peppers in here, and those will take over once the last of these spring items are gone. I don't try to grow a whole lot in this space simply because I've learned the things I want to come out here and harvest are the really high reward items that grow well in raised beds, like herbs, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers. I'll leave the things that take a little more square footage to buying at the farmer's market. This gardenia is the cultivar August Beauty, and I'm not really sure why, because it's blooming here in May for us, but it is lovely. Has these kind of delicate rosette flowers and they smell incredible. This does not work very well to cut and bring into the house more than a day or two. The flowers brown pretty quickly, and They're just not a great cut flower, but it's a wonderful garden plant. Probably as soon as it's done with this glorious bloom, I'm going to give it a significant reduction cut. I mean, this is delightful, having it spill romantically over the gate, but it does make the path a little bit hard to traverse. So I'm all for plants touching you as you walk by. I actually think it reminds you where you are. You're in a garden. You don't have to be in a municipal 4 to 6 foot wide public sidewalk. This is a very intimate garden path. But that said, I'll probably take it back here in another couple weeks. We just planted 6 Fortune's osmanthus, Fortune's tea olives right here to swallow this fence and come up as a hedge from about 5 to 6 foot high. So I am 6 foot, if you can imagine me, as a hedge this way and a hedge this way, because we spend so much time in our pavilion now, and the view this direction out the pavilion is essentially a parking lot. This will be a solid gate so that over time we've made this essentially a walled off, totally separate area. A note about common milkweed. This is not for the faint of heart. I got a couple of sprigs, probably like a tiny little piece of a root from a master gardener friend, and put it in the ground. This is good for the monarchs. We want to support ecology, and you just have to be very careful where you put this because it spreads like crazy. For the last 3 years, after I put it here, every year I have tried to get it all out and absolutely failed. You can see this year it's back more than ever. I would have to do like a scorched earth situation on this bed, and at this point I'm fine with it being here. I've learned a lesson. This orange flower being butterfly weed, the one that I have over in the cutting garden, it does spread a little bit, but not nearly with the aggressiveness as its cousin, the common milkweed. So it is really fun to see the monarch caterpillars when they come and eat their way down the stalk. You feel like you're doing your bit for the world, but you just have to be careful where you put it. This is a fun surprise under here. Just one of those things that you wouldn't really necessarily notice. This is a Japanese painted fern, and by the middle of the summer, it can tend to look a little bit scorchy because it likes a good bit of shade as well, but just under this bench, it gets, I mean, it's huge, very happy, just almost like a little petticoat peeking out. One of those fun horticultural treasures that probably almost nobody notices, but since you're here to listen to me talk about my garden, I'm going to tell you. You know why we're here. This is the jewel of the month of May, for me at least, is the blue hydrangeas. Almost nothing else that I can think of blooms with this vividness of blue. The borage actually does, that we just looked at in the kitchen garden, but they're little teeny. And it's a reason this is one of everyone's southern favorites. This is the variety Endless Summer, and it does kind of bloom. The theory is that it blooms through the summer. Really, I get a very good bloom now and a trickle of blooms throughout the season. But I'll bring them inside, I'll dry them. They turn a kind of purple when they dry. It's just a wonderful plant. This bed in here is wild. It is one we have not tackled well yet. We just let be what is in here. And I love the rose campion and the hairy vetch earlier in the spring. That's what this is. It's a relative of the pea family. and it fixes nitrogen in the soils, and it gives this frothy, beautiful effect in the spring. And then when it starts to yellow out, when the weather gets really hot, I'll just come in with a bucket or a wagon and rip out everything that's turned yellow, just so it doesn't look more messy. Eventually, I'll give you a sneak peek for my plan for this area. I would like a table in here. We have an odd orientation for our house because the main street is actually this way, and our house faces a side street, just how the lot was originally parceled off and the owner chose. So we have this little section here that's kind of our social, our welcome to the street. And I plan to make this a really nice picnic area, almost like if anybody's walking by, I would want them almost to feel as if they would be welcome to come and sit here. So that's a project for another time. It will require a bit of clearing out to do. Here I have a piece of chicken wire that I am just making into a ball, a rough ball shape, in order to hold the stems. I did this last month and my ball vanished somewhere. Some squirrel has the spikiest nest ever. There we go. It's down in the bottom. This will just support the structure of my big stems. These little snips are the Felco fine tip snips. They are the best for this kind of fine snipping, as the name would suggest. Not really anything sturdier than about this, which is maybe 1/4 of an inch thick. They're perfect for this and under. If it's a woody-ish stem or like a big pithy dahlia stem, they'd be totally great for that as well. They're just a great light duty pair, and because I don't use them on really woody, hard things, they stay sharp. All right, we'll come out into the light here so you can see what I have done. I'm always amazed how even when I am not coming in to an arrangement with a specific intention of gathering a color palette that all goes together, each season, and really each micro season, each week that I were to come out here and do this, it would have a slightly different character. So I'm quite happy with this. It's very eclectic and a little unusual. Hopefully that gives you inspiration for cutting some things out of your yard, whether that's your kitchen garden, your shrubs, even off the trees. That makes great foliage. Just some unconventional arrangement elements paired with those old classic favorites that really grab your eye, like the big mop head blooms, makes for a really interesting piece. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful week in your gardens.